Predators beat the Pittsburgh Penguins 4-1. Take that, 2017 Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll break down the game. Another big night for Roman Josi, who is now on a historic pace, and why there's still plenty to be concerned about for the Preds, even though they won the game last night. Plus, Western Conference Wednesday. We are going to be talking about the teams in the Western Conference to watch during Monday's trade deadline. Trade talk's picking up, folks. All coming up today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning into the Locked On Predators podcast. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have a partner in crime who's back. Welcome back. We missed you, Ann.
I missed talking hockey. The friend that I was with was probably far less interested. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at ontheforecheck.com.
Yeah, but it sounds like you got a nice little escape from hockey for a couple of days, so...
I did. And I did not miss not seeing that Blues loss, and it was exciting to get the updates on the wild win. So it worked out really well.
It was indeed a wild win. It was also a wild win last night for the Nashville Predators. They, of course, beat Pittsburgh by a score of 4-1. It was 1-1 right at the start of the second period. And then the Preds pulled away. Goals by Janot, Tolvanen, Yakov Trenin late. Roman Josi, another big game. 3 points for him. A lot to get with him in a second. But first, though, Ann, let's start with your one word to describe last night's game.
Well, as a girl born and raised in Pennsylvania, I love the city of Pittsburgh, but I do not like the Pittsburgh Penguins. So this game really was kind of for me. I was a little bit nervous going in, but my one word to describe the game is satisfying. I mean, that was just so satisfying. It was not perhaps the prettiest win, and I know we're going to talk about that. But the win did have some great moments. It had some really good moments for some specific players that I'm excited about. But they did what they needed to do to get the win. And you know what? After 2017, I think it will, for the rest of our lives, feel satisfying to beat the Penguins.
It really does, doesn't it? We were kind of talking about this yesterday, where it's like, there's always going to be that little bit of grudge against the Pittsburgh Penguins, even though you can equally respect how good they've been as a franchise for the past 20 years or so. My one word, and you kind of hit on it, and is patchwork, like a patchwork quilt. And, you have a nice little makings of a quilt here, and then just kind of little scraps of fabric that you just kind of patch together. And when you're all done, it kind of makes one big, pretty, heat-inducing thing. And last night's game kind of felt like a patchwork of sorts, in that the Predators had a lot of bad things go on.
True.
But they also had a lot of good things go on. And somehow they took both, and they managed to just kind of quilt together all these little patches of good hockey, bad hockey, and they formed together to make one giant, beautiful 4-1 win. It's like, one of those things where it's like you break it down to the individual pieces that went into last night's game. Weren't great. A lot of turnovers for the Predators. Discipline was kind of another issue again. Defensively, very sloppy. But you know what? They put together a bunch of nice stuff too, like Roman Josi's big night, 3 points for him. UC Saros, probably one of his best games in the past 2 weeks or so. And then really strong on the penalty kill. So it's like all these little things that were really good that you could kind of fold into the bad parts of the game, and it wound up with a 4-1 Predators win.
I absolutely love that analogy because I really do think there were little pieces here and there, like you said, little pockets in this game where it could have gotten out of control for the Nashville Predators. Fortunately, I think UC Saros really kind of held some things together down the stretch for the Predators. But there were, glimpses of this is a team that could really be taken seriously in a playoff run. We had pockets of that kind of play. Then we had pockets of like, oops, really shouldn't have done that kind of play. So I love the analogy of putting it together and, came up with something that's functional and could be considered somewhat attractive.
Now I know it's kind of nature to break it down and kind of nitpick stuff here and there. That's just kind of what
Hmm.
we do. That's what pretty much any Preds fan on Twitter is going to do after every game. But I think at this point in the year, especially when you're chasing the playoffs, and especially when you're in the playoffs, you have to remember that all that matters is the final score. And we kind of talked about this earlier
True.
in the year where, you know, the Preds aren't going to be lights out every single night. They're going to have bad games. You have to figure out how to eke out a win despite those bad performances. And yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with the game last night, but they had players step up and make plays
Hmm.
that counted to win. And, so that's kind of going to be the interesting thing to me. Yeah, the Preds aren't going to like ace every game from here on out. You're
Right.
certainly not going to win every game from here on out. But
Probably no.
if you can have games like you did last night where you're not playing your best hockey and you're still managing to beat one of the best teams in the league by a score of 4-1, those are the kind of performances you would want to
Yes.
not encourage, but it's one of those things where you can look at and say, okay, we can tough out wins.
Yeah. And I will say that I don't think Pittsburgh played their best game either. I think they
No.
definitely had pockets of mistakes and they also had pockets where they played well. I think both teams really were hot and cold at different times in this game. But like you said, at this point in the season, what really matters is what you do in those pockets of time. Do you capitalize on the other team's mistakes? Do you do something to prevent your mistake from becoming catastrophic? And Nashville has not always been able to do that. And I think in this game last night, there was something that we saw of being able to survive the kind of rougher moments of the game and capitalize on when they had some momentum. And I think that really is key, especially like you said, at this time in the year, coming down to the wire with the playoffs in sight. You really have to be able to play this game. We talk about a 60-minute game, but there are also games within this game where there may be a 2-3 minute stretch where how you play that stretch is going to affect the outcome. And I think it was reassuring to see the Nashville Predators be able to survive some of those 2 to 3 minute painful stretches and to capitalize on those windows where they were doing some things really well.
Yeah, you said the key word, capitalize. That's what
Yes.
good teams do. And if you think back to, let's say 2019, 2020, where the Preds were dominating games and still losing, what
Yes.
what matters more, getting that win or being the stats darling of the night? So, you're gonna
Right.
have nights where you just flat out outclass your opponent, like we saw against Minnesota, and you're gonna have nights like last night where you don't have your best performance, but you're still able to squeak out a win. Both of those are important for the Preds going forward. Roman Josi, another huge
Oh,
night for him. Why is he not
love it.
getting the Norris love he deserves? That's a question we are going to tackle in just a second. But first, want to mention today's show brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, sometimes even better than a candy bar. Yeah, it's not a protein bar. It's a treat covered in 100% real chocolate, but it is low in calories, low in sugar, low in net carbs, and high in protein. For the month of March, they have something out called White Chocolate Shamrock, where it is basically tastes like a shamrock shake. It is covered in white chocolate, and covered in cookie pieces. It is delicious. If you're a big St. Patrick's Day fan or just like green food, that is something for you. They got plenty of regular flavors as well: coconut almond, mint brownie, cherry barcia, salted caramel, just to name a few. So there's something for every single taste. Try it yourself. Go to built.com right now. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Yeah, we're talking about the Preds' big win over the Pittsburgh Penguins, and one of the stars of the night again, the captain, to quote our good friends Preds PA Paul, Roman Josi, who is playing the best hockey of his career right now, and I don't think it's close.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think statistics wise, it's looking like he's on pace for a 95 point season. That's outrageously amazing. I think also the way he's gotten some of these points, he has been so good on things like the power play. He has 8 power play goals. He's just doing so many things so well, defensively, offensively. And yet it feels a little like there are crickets when we're talking Norris Trophy. And I'm wondering why only the people in Nashville seem to be talking about the season Roman Josi is having right now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, he's the only defenseman in the top 15 in points right now. He's very good in pretty much all of the metrics: offensive generation, defense. But yeah, he was, I believe, 5th in the Norris odds right now. Way behind like guys like Adam Fox and Cale Makar. It seems like this is just going to be given to Cale Makar at the moment.
Yeah, and statistically, if you compare he and Roman Josi, Roman Josi's not coming up short here. So it's a very interesting dynamic in the league that I'm curious why you think we're just not hearing much about Roman Josi. Is it small market? Even though he's won before, so you would think that this would, be something they would revisit. His name would be revisited. It's a little bit flummoxing to me.
Well, I think it's a mix, because you look back to when he won the Norris Trophy. He wasn't favored a lot of that season, even during when the whole Josi for Norris campaign.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of people thought Dougie Hamilton was the runaway favorite, even though Josi had kind of, comparable, if not better, stats to him. And then Hamilton got hurt, and so that unfortunately took him out of the running. I think that year was just kind of Josi by default. So, even though he was the best defenseman in the league that season by pretty much every measure,
yes,
still a lot of people that thought he shouldn't have won it that year, or a lot of people that were kind of looking for any excuse, like, is there somebody else? And I do think there's a little bit of that small market bias, and I don't want to sound like a guilty fan.
Right.
But, when Cale Makar is your runaway favorite, whoever you talk to, and you look and you see Roman Josi's having a better year than him, in pretty much every aspect of the game. And, the only difference you can find is the Predators are, a team in Nashville that is currently in the wild card hunt, and the Avalanche are a storied franchise currently in first place in the NHL. So that it's like, okay, well, then what's the deal with that? Is it really bias? Then you look like Victor Hedman is ahead of Josi in a lot of people's eyes, and Josi's having a better season from him. And the only reason you can think of, is Victor Hedman is having a good season on a good team, on a team that has won back-to-back Stanley Cups. So, I mean, again, like, I know I sound bitter. I know I sound like the hockey fans and writers don't care about Nashville. But it is, I think, telling that Roman Josi is having the season that he's having, and he's still not getting the same amount of love. Hell, my argument for Josi a couple of years ago over John Carlson was, hey, points don't tell the whole story. You got to look at the
Right.
whole volume of work. Well, Josi has the points this year, and still has like the better metrics than Carlson did that year. And Carlson back then was getting more love for Norris than Josi is now. So I don't know if it's just a
Yeah.
stacked field. You know, Adam Fox is certainly into it too, but
Yeah. I think that could be a factor. I think there are a couple of them that are really having great years. And I agree with you. I don't want to play the oh, poor us, nobody pays attention to us card. You want to be able to step back and look at it objectively. But when you look at things like the statistics, it doesn't make sense that he is not a larger part of the conversation. And it's frustrating. I will say that I think Roman Josi in general is probably overlooked and underrated. And I think you don't notice it until he's not there. And we went through this earlier in the season where he missed a few games, and we had kind of talked about UC Saros as the MVP of this team, hands down. And then Roman Josi was out a few games. And when he came back, we were like, whoa, wait a minute now. Roman Josi is the MVP of the game. And I think he contributes so many things that are um, not measurable statistically to this team. I think he makes people better. I think he creates things for other people. And I think those are things that are not measurable. And I think that hurts him a little bit. And I think even in Nashville, I think sometimes we don't appreciate just how fortunate we are to have somebody like him. Yes, he won the Norris Trophy before, and we know that, and that's amazing. But I think his career overall is going to be something that really causes people in Nashville to say, wow, I can't believe I got to watch the Predators during his tenure, playing in this city, because he's that good at intangible things as well. Roman Josi's just a really good hockey player. And I think he's a good leader, and he has not gotten enough credit for that either.
Roman Josi right now is the best defenseman in the NHL. I'm not
Yes.
talking about this season. I'm not talking about like stats or numbers or anything like that. Roman Josi is the best defenseman playing in the NHL right now. And it's getting harder and harder, I think, for people to overlook that fact. You look at the
Yes.
value he brings to his team. You look at the numbers he's putting up. You look at him, these numbers are carrying the Predators into the postseason conversation. And
Yes.
I still think, are going to be a very big threat. That doesn't happen without Roman Josi. He is a spark
Yes.
plug scoring, maybe one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL right now. His defense, puck possession, little things like that, like the minor details like zone entries and exits, one of the best in the NHL. He is the total package. And I think it's time for people around the NHL to start respecting that because of the type of player he is. With all due respect, if he was playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, people would be talking about him like they talked about Nick Lindstrom.
I think you are 100% correct.
So I do think there is some sort of a market bias there. And again, not to sound like the jilted fan, but I do think we need around the league to recognize that Roman Josi is the guy that teams should model their defensive group on.
I would agree with that. And I agree that it has something to do with exposure across the league. Take that for what it's worth. But I don't think you will find another defenseman. And I think you would be hard pressed to find more than a handful of other players who do more for their team and make their team better than you will find from Roman Josi.
Right. Other good players from last night's game. How about Colton Sissons? What a game he had.
Oh, come on.
Everywhere on the ice. He had just under or just over 2 minutes of power play time, just under 4 minutes of shorthanded time, wound up with 2 assists. Again, a beast in the faceoff circle, just over 60% of his faceoffs won last night. I mean, Colton Sissons.
Can we take a minute and talk about his hit on Sidney Crosby?
Yes.
Because was that not the most glorious 2 seconds of hockey? It may be the most joy-inducing 2 seconds of hockey I've seen all season long. Oh my goodness.
Really?
Colton Sissons was everywhere.
He was. And you know what? There's not a Kevin Pollock in sight to ruin this moment against the
That's right.
Yeah. So no goal that one.
Yes, that's right.
Colton Sissons is another guy, and I know you weren't here yesterday, Ann, but I kind of talked about this yesterday where the Preds, kind of have players and pieces that sort of remind you of teams recently that have won the cup. And Colton Sissons is somebody who definitely fits that bill. That guy that you can just plug into that bottom six, but he's going to give you solid, reliable minutes no matter what the role or the situation. You saw it again last night. A lot of key defensive plays down the stretch. Very good on the penalty kill, but he also contributed in a big way with 2 points. I mean, this is another very complete game for number 10.
Yeah, and you know what? He has been somebody who maybe isn't showing up on the stat sheet quite as much as he has in past years, but the people that he is playing with are benefiting from his time on the ice. I don't think, for as good as Jeannot has been, as great as Yakov Trenin is, I don't think they have the seasons that they're having without Colton Sissons. I think he is one of those underrated, really important guys on this team. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, he's up to 24 points on the year. 30 is his career high. And of course, he has about 22 games to chase that. So there's another milestone to watch out. What else stood out to you last night, Ann, in the game last night? Was there any player or aspect of the game that you looked at and thought, you know what, this is somebody who deserves some kudos?
Yeah, for sure. For me, one of the most exciting parts of the game last night was the play of Eeli Tolvanen. And of course, we're going to talk about his goal because this has been a long time coming. I hate the term snake bit, but I think that it is pretty accurate for what Eeli Tolvanen has been going through. He's doing the right things. He's in the right places. He's shooting well, but he's just not found the back of the net. So to see him get a goal last night, I feel like that's kind of a monkey off his back, and I was thrilled for it. But I think his play overall in the game stood out. I think he is doing so many things well. And for a player that came into this league and who has sort of a reputation for being excellent at one thing, and that's his shot, what he has been able to do with his game over the course of this time where he struggled with his shot, I think is just such a phenomenal testament to an all-around player and also to the coaching staff that the Predators have, who really have developed so many things for him. He was great with checks. His defensive play was excellent. He had some poke checks that were great. He was good on the power play. I love what I'm seeing from Tolvanen, and I love that he got a goal.
Here's an interesting question for you. It kind of segues into our next segment. And only brings this up because there's a lot of people that have brought this up on Twitter. Is Tolvanen a possible trade chip?
That question hurts my guts. You know what? I can see where he would be a valuable piece. I would hope that Nashville would not put him out there, but I can see where Eeli Tolvanen could be a really valuable chip in some sort of a deal, and I hate it.
It would have to be
I would hate to see it.
It would have to be a knock your socks off kind of deal. Like, it
would have to be. Yeah. It would. I mean, if they're going to do a big, huge thing, then maybe Eeli Tolvanen, but he's not a piece they're going to move for, next to nothing. But I would hate to see that, but I think he's a tempting little fella.
Yeah, well, on the topic of the trade deadline, of course, that is coming up Monday. And since today is Western Conference Wednesday, we thought we would go through the West and look at some people who might be players at Monday's deadline. Who's going to be a big buyer? Who do we think is going to be in fire sale mode? And who do we think is going to be traded? And yeah, I mean, it's a very weird trade deadline this year. It seems like there are very few teams who are willing to just kind of pull the trigger on like a big mega deal.
I keep thinking that it's going to be a last minute huge flurry of trades, but the closer we get to the deadline, the more I'm wondering if maybe a lot of teams are just going to kind of sit still and only do a few little pieces here and there. And in Nashville, I think everybody is just kind of waiting with bated breath for some sort of word as far as Filip Forsberg's going too. So there's a lot of anxiety growing as we get closer to Monday's, deadline.
Yeah, it seems like we're waiting on like one or two big dominoes to
Mm-hmm.
fall. And I'm sure around the league, Forsberg's one. Although, like I mentioned yesterday, I think at this point it's a foregone conclusion. Forsberg's staying
I would hope
until at
so.
least the end of the season. I don't
Mhm.
see David Poile trading him.
Mm-mm.
That would just be a disaster. But I'm sure a lot of teams are kind of maybe waiting on an official word. And who knows, David Poile maybe waiting to see if there's a team out there, probably in the East, that makes some kind of mega offer that just blows the Preds away. But I don't really see that happening.
Yeah.
One team in the West I can see being big buyers at the deadline, and we're already kind of seeing it, is Colorado.
Yes.
I mean, they've kind of had to, over the past couple of years, they've had this big mega team. They've had really, a lot of success, but they just haven't gotten past that second round. They collapsed to Vegas. And I think if, you look at their record this year and how well they're playing, if they have another disappointing performance, I think you're going to see some question marks.
Yes.
You saw it already. They brought in Josh Manson from the Ducks. And they're really rumored to be kicking the tires on Claude Giroux.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if the reports out of Philadelphia are to believe, Claude Giroux has told the Flyers that Colorado is his preferred destination. And now with Gabriel Landeskog out for a while, there's definitely, I guess, incentive to maybe bring him in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a team I'm watching, and it may not stop with Giroux. I think they may add a couple of other depth pieces as well. You saw them trade for Nico Sturm. So this is a team I think can definitely be aggressive come Monday.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think that they're going to go kind of all in this year. And another team I think that may be kind of active because they're going to want to go all in is the Calgary Flames.
Yes.
I really think this team feels like they've got something going and that they could make some, good postseason things happen. And I think there are some pieces that they're looking at that they may want to bring in. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Flames kind of active as we get closer to Monday, just bringing in maybe a couple of extra pieces here and there. And they also have some things to offer. So I think the Flames are going to be very interesting, a very interesting team to watch the closer we get to Monday, because I do think they're going to want to get some things done.
Yeah, the Flames kind of remind me of the Columbus Blue Jackets from a couple of years ago, where everybody knew they had all these big contracts that weren't going to come back by the end of the year, but they're like, you know what? Let's just see what we can do. Let's see if we can go wild. So I think that's kind of where the Flames are in this boat, and they are playing lights out right now.
Yes.
Or flames out because, they're the Calgary Flames. So I think they are, I agree with you. I think they're a sneaky team to watch that could add a couple of significant pieces at the deadline. How about sellers, Ann? Who's somebody that you think is going to be in fire sale mode?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Arizona Coyotes. I feel like
Everybody's looking at the Arizona Coyotes.
I feel like this is, the Kmart blue light special that's going to be happening. I think they've got Phil Kessel standing under a flashing blue light. I think, they've got Jacob Chikrin ready to go. So I think that they're going to be selling. And again, this is all your fault, Nick, but I am really interested to see if the Predators make a move to get Phil Kessel, because this was your idea. And all of a
This was
sudden,
my idea.
And I went down the Phil Kessel rabbit hole and came back going, the Predators should really look at getting him. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on them to see kind of where some of their pieces go. But I think you're going to see, I mean, I don't even know what you're going to end up seeing. This is like a clearance, going out of business, potential sale thing happening in Arizona. So that's my sellers team. Who are your sellers that you're watching?
It's not the first time we've heard Arizona Coyotes and fire sale, and who knows what's going to happen.
There you go.
About the Coyotes.
Yeah.
Another team that there's two in the West that I really want to keep an eye on. One is the Anaheim Ducks, who, of course, they got off to a very hot start. They have a couple of really good franchise cornerstones, but then they kind of fizzled out. And so now new GM Pat Verbeek is kind of looking at, some of his expiring contracts, guys like, Ricard Raquel, guys like Hampus Lindholm. They're both guys that I think the Ducks want to bring back and want to be a part of this rebuild moving forward. But it's going to be like, hey, are they going to want to stay around to be a couple more years, or could Pat Verbeek get more value out of maybe trading them for a interest renter at the deadline, as opposed to trying to re-sign them and risk losing them for nothing? And then the San Jose Sharks are really interesting to watch. Tomas Hertl, maybe, if you're taking Filip Forsberg off the market, which you probably should, he would maybe be the biggest prize at the deadline at this point. He is a power forward in every sense of the word in his prime. Yeah. And it's the same boat. The Sharks are clearly rebuilding. Hertl is in his prime, has an expiring contract. It seems like a lot of people in the Sharks organization want him back. Even Hertl himself sounds like he wants to be back, but you got to have a deal that makes sense for both you and the team. And in his prime, I'm not sure he's going to want to do that. So I think it's almost like a Forsberg situation where they want to have him signed at the deadline. But if he doesn't, then I think he's going to wind up being moved. Yeah. I should clarify the old Forsberg situation.
Okay, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm going to need a second there.
No. Like, to clarify, again, I think Filip Forsberg's staying put in Nashville for at least the end of the year. Hopefully more. Because if you listen to interviews from David Poile and Roman Josi, it's like they're almost like kind of dropping Easter eggs. Oh, there might be something close.
Just drop the contract, boys. Drop the contract.
Well, I think he said I think David Poile said yesterday that the only issue right now is a dollar amount.
Yeah,
that's the only thing they can't agree on. So.
Well, I hope they take Diamond Rio's wise advice and meet in the middle, because we just got to get this done. It's been hanging over Nashville all season, and I think it would be great mentally for the team too, just to have some sort of idea of what's happening. So get her done, guys. Get her done.
I thought you were going to go with a hockey song and go "The Middle" by Jimmy Eat World.
No, that's way too cool for me.
Oh,
that's way too. Cool.
What are you saying about Diamond Rio then?
Oh, but it's more my genre, and it's a little bit more my age group. God love Diamond Rio.
Well, I think you're cool enough for Jimmy Eat World, Ann.
Well, thank you.
Again, more trade deadline stuff coming up throughout the week, and Monday we are going to be doing a special trade deadline show coming up after the deadline. So be sure to keep in touch for us for the rest of the week as we ramp up our deadline coverage. Should be an interesting year, and that is for sure. In the meantime, though, where can the people find you online?
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com, and you can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
I'm Nick Morgan. You can find me at ontheforecheck.com as well. Find me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Also, be sure to follow the podcast at LO_Predators. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like us, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of the show or what you want to see from us moving forward. And also what you think about the deadline. Do you think there's going to be some big deals in the mix, or do you think this is going to be a quiet year? That's going to do it for us today on the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode.